Oil dropped 16% in a single day. The Dow had its best day in a year. The S&P 500 surged 2.5%. Japan's Nikkei soared 5%. Korea's Kospi jumped 7%. Germany's DAX climbed 5%. Traders around the world priced in the end of the energy crisis in a matter of hours. And they were wrong. The Strait of Hormuz is not open. The oil is not flowing. And the ceasefire that triggered the biggest crude collapse since 2020 is already falling apart. Here's what the market assumed. The ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran was announced less than 2 hours before Trump's deadline to destroy every power plant and bridge in the country. Trump said the deal was conditional on the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran confirmed it would allow the resumption of shipping during the 2-week ceasefire period. Traders heard ceasefire, heard Hormuz reopening, and sold oil as fast as they could. WTI crude fell from $113 to $94.41, a 16.4% drop, the largest single-day decline since April 2020 during the pandemic. Brent crude fell 13% to $94.75. Both benchmarks posted their biggest drops in 6 years. Here's what actually happened. On the first day of the ceasefire, 2 ships crossed the Strait of Hormuz. One of them was Iranian. On the second day, that number rose to 5. Before the war, roughly 135 vessels transited the strait every day. The CEO of Abu Dhabi National Oil Company said it plainly. The Strait of Hormuz is not open. Access is being restricted, conditioned, and controlled. That is not freedom of navigation. That is coercion. 230 loaded oil tankers are currently waiting inside the Persian Gulf with nowhere to go. Iran's military said it would regulate passage through the strait, granting the country unique economic and geopolitical standing. That doesn't sound like a strait that's been reopened. It sounds like a toll booth that just got a ceasefire's permission to keep operating. The reason the strait hasn't reopened is not complicated. It's Lebanon. The ceasefire was hours old when Israel launched Operation Eternal Darkness, the largest wave of strikes against Hezbollah since the war began. 100 targets hit in 10 minutes, more than 250 people killed, over 1,000 wounded. Lebanon declared a national day of mourning. Pakistan, the country that brokered the ceasefire, said the agreement covers Lebanon. Israel said it doesn't. The U.S. sided with Israel. Iran's position is that the ceasefire applies to all fronts, including Lebanon. As long as Israel continues striking Lebanon, Iran considers the ceasefire violated, and the strait stays effectively closed. The market didn't price any of this in. It priced in a headline. There's a deeper structural issue the market is also ignoring. Even if the ceasefire holds perfectly and Iran genuinely opens the strait, shipping won't normalize overnight. Maritime insurance is the bottleneck. During the 5 weeks of war, insurance premiums for vessels transiting Hormuz surged to wartime levels. Underwriters are not going to drop those premiums because of a 2-week ceasefire that both sides are already accusing each other of violating. Ship owners won't send vessels through an actively mined waterway without insurance, and insurers won't write policies until the risk is genuinely resolved. The U.S. military confirmed earlier in the war that Iran had planted naval mines in the strait. 16 Iranian mine layers were destroyed, but nobody knows how many mines remain. One analyst at K. Peeler estimated that even under optimistic conditions, traffic might reach 10 to 15 vessels per day, roughly the same pace as during the war itself. Over 1,000 vessels are backed up inside the Gulf. Clearing that backlog under normal conditions would take more than 2 weeks, and conditions are nowhere near normal. Trump's top economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, tried to put a positive spin on it, saying that getting even one big tanker through would provide a huge chunk of what's missing. One tanker carries about 2 million barrels. Before the war, 20 million barrels moved through the strait every day. One tanker is not a reopening, it's a rounding error. The market also mispriced the supply picture. Before the war, oil was $67 a barrel. 5 weeks later, even after the 16% drop, it's still at $94. That's 40% above pre-war levels. Gas prices nationally hit $4.17 per gallon, up more than $1 since the war started. Analysts at GasBuddy said it could take 1 to 2 weeks for the national average to fall below $4 and months to return to pre-war levels below $3. The ceasefire doesn't erase 5 weeks of supply disruption. The oil that didn't flow through Hormuz during the war is gone. It wasn't stored. It wasn't rerouted. 10 million barrels per day of production was effectively taken off the market. That deficit doesn't disappear because a ceasefire was signed on paper. And by Thursday, the market was already correcting. Oil jumped back above $100 a barrel as doubts about the ceasefire grew. Asian markets gave back their gains. The Hang Seng fell. The Shanghai Composite dropped. Korea's Kospi declined. The pattern was clear. The initial reaction was euphoria based on a headline, and the correction was reality catching up. Rapidan Energy Group's Bob McNally described it accurately. The market has been eager to get good news, but it remains to be seen if the Strait of Hormuz opens fully. That's the whole ball of wax, and so far Washington and Tehran seem to be talking past each other on that. This is the gap the market is sitting in right now. Oil at $94 prices in a ceasefire that works. Oil at $113 prices in a ceasefire that fails. The truth is somewhere in between, and nobody knows which direction it breaks. But there's one detail that should concern anyone betting on normalization. Iran's military statement after the ceasefire didn't say the strait was reopening. It said Iran would regulate passage, granting the country unique economic and geopolitical standing. Ships that have crossed during the war paid tolls exceeding $1 million each. Iran set up its own shipping channel near Larak Island, separate from the traditional route. Payments were assessed in Chinese yuan. None of that infrastructure has been dismantled. The ceasefire didn't restore the old Hormuz. It paused the fighting while the new Hormuz stays in place. The 16% drop was based on the assumption that ships would move through Hormuz freely. 2 days later, 230 tankers are still waiting, the toll booth is still operating, and the only country whose ships are moving without restriction is China.